Good evening, happy Friday, and Shabbat Shalom. I'm Lauren Cruz, one of your hosts of Living Waters, Falling Deeper in Love with God's Word.
Yeah, and I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for joining us. And Stephanie is not feeling well tonight, so we're going to say a prayer for her that we can get through our evening and let her go and get some rest.
The show must go on, as they say.
So I know. So our energy level is going to be we're going to match Stephanie because she's not feeling good. I feel bad for her. So we are still going through the Torah class, Book of Romans. I have lost track of the time. We've been doing this for a few months. I don't know how long we've been doing it, but we're so close to the end.
Yeah.
We're actually going to finish up chapter 13. So if you don't have the Bible or the book with us, or the book with you, join us with your Bible. Open up to Romans 13. We're going to go through 13 pretty quick because there's not a ton of information. It's a very short one and literally 14 verses. And then we'll probably start some of chapter 14. So for both chapters, a little bit of background, and then we'll get into it. So Romans 13. And I'll go ahead and just give us a little tiny bit of background. We touched on this last week that we talked a little bit about a shame society or a shame honor society. And we've actually talked about it before in some other books that we've covered. This is something that the ancient Near East very much has a tribal mentality, a community mentality. And I actually found a really good quote on page 333. It says, shame and honor societies have their basis in tribalism, and thus people are group thinkers. That is conforming to the group as ancient traditions is always the standards to be reached. Individualism is seen as rebellion and going against the group, and thus it's a bad thing, and the person seeks individualism would be shunned. And you made a decision too based on like for the good of the group. I mean, if you've heard of that phrase before, for the good of everyone, for the good of your family. It may not be even what you wanted to do or not wanted to do, but it's what tradition has happened, how your family would handle it. So that's the setting for chapter 13. I'll even push into chapter 12 a little bit because 12 and 13 are a lot of instructions.
Yeah.
He's going through this list of, do this and don't do this. And this is how you should act. And this is how you should respond. So that's kind of the culture in which we're sitting.
The halakha for believers.
Yeah.
And all of it comes from the Jewish understanding too. That's what's we think that some of the stuff was just made up for us. He just kind of came up with this theology and everything for Christians, but it really wasn't. It was he's drawing from the information he knows and memorized, and that he's been reading and studying since he was a child. So.
I have another quote too. It says, right does not equate to honorable and wrong does not equate to shameful. Like you could even do something wrong and it wouldn't, that wouldn't bring shame on you if it honored your family. I know it's hard to wrap your brain around that.
Yeah. But the story of Dinah in Genesis 34. That was one of the stories I was telling her, Lauren, about before we started recording. And when Dinah was raped by a man from another, not tribe, but another nation.
Culture, another nation.
Within their borders. And so her brothers basically and her father were angry. But the brothers decided to kind of just like deceive them and say, hey, we can't let we can't give our daughters to you and your country unless you're circumcised like we are, unless you become like us. And that was the phrase, the verse, what the verse said. So they agreed like, oh, yeah, we'll get all these women from them. And because then they went back. And they were trying to talk everybody else into this. And they're like, we'll get all their women. And so just get circumcised. Well, they got circumcised. And then while they were recovering, they came in and killed them.
That's right. And so even then they lied to the men. I mean, they had intentions and they
It
lied.
was honor.
Right. So like lying, we think of, oh, that's a terrible, thing to do, but the honor, the regaining the honor is more important than the means in which they did it. So,
and that goes back to that verse of what Jesus said, turn your cheek, because the thing is he knew for himself that very well that honor stance would lead to murder, would lead to something much more violent than being
right,
slapped on a face,
right,
on a cheek.
right.
So they're like, no, you accept it and move on. You don't retaliate because
Right.
I'm the one. And that's where that verse comes in, that, it's for me to, vengeance is mine, kind of thing.
And I think it's important too, because this is going to be big in 13 and 14, that Paul keeps, the commentator keeps reiterating that Paul's number one is love thyself, love thy neighbor as thyself. And so for you to not turn the other cheek, or to do evil, or to not allow God to have the vengeance, you're not loving thy neighbor. And so that would be what's important in this instance. And I think the other thing that is important, and I think I mentioned this last week too, is the honor system is odd for us, because in the Western world, America especially, we're very individualistic, and I'm going to do what's right in my own eyes. And the rest of the world, like, there's more cultures that still have the honor system, the honor shame mentality than there are that are individuals. So we're at the deficit of not understanding it. Somebody in another country who reads the same passage may completely understand it, because it's very much part of their culture. So
and they're very community based, not very individually based.
We are not. Not. Okay. So anything else on 332, 333 that you enjoyed?
No, there was just one thing on 334, that the last, not the last sentence on the page, but the last sentence of the middle paragraph.
I have that whole section highlighted.
Yeah, I did too. It's kind of saying some of what you said, but the sentence I liked is the shame and honor system was alive and well, and it went directly against the most foundational principles of the biblical Torah.
Right. I have that too. And so, I mean, it's the shame honor system, but it was very much alive and well. And even Paul is starting to address, like, I know this is what we've been doing. I know that this is becoming very popular in your culture. I know we do this, but we need to change our thinking on this. And so he's directly addressing the halakha, the oral understanding of things for the day, and reiterating Torah. And that's been part of the problem, is that the halakha, the verbal, has become more important than what was actually written in Torah. And he's challenging that.
And some of that is good. And he did, I mean, as far as like what he's the halakha for the believers, he's trying to stress the good parts of Judaism and the good message that is found in Judaism and their writings.
I'm going to read this. I know it's a lot. It's pretty couple of lines, but are you okay if I just go ahead and read this? Okay.
That's fine.
All right. So this is just a little bit further down. Blah, blah, blah. I personally find the opening verses of Romans 13 to be a little bit problematic. This is what the commentary is saying. Because if we take these verses simplistic at face value and remove them from the context of shame and honor, which is what we happen to do a lot. We read this and we remove that context of shame and honor in which Paul created these rulings. It's because if we try to apply them to a modern Western democratic democracies based not on shame and honor, but rather on guilt and innocence. And that's the difference. It's shame and honor versus guilt and innocence. They create some of the worst sort of doctrines of and injustices. And just as it's critical we take the laws of Moses more in their spirit than in the letter in order to transcend culture and time, it's equally important to do the same with these New Testament rulings, sayings of Yeshua. Paul and others, some of the rulings say that we can indeed leap across time and culture boundaries, literally and fully intact, such as dietary laws. Like that can leap across time and cultures. That's easy to understand. But others of them, like a death penalty for adultery and laws against intercropping, we must massage and be deeply prayerfully pondered in order to properly apply them to the entirety of different cultures, conditions, and government structures of the 21st century. And that's not saying Torah doesn't apply, but in some of these cases, obviously, I'm not going to help my neighbor get their donkey out of the ditch, right? That doesn't apply to me. But the spirit of that law, and the basis of, the equality and the good neighbor and love thy neighbor, that aspect of it, I can help them with. So
and it's also treating God's creation with respect. I mean, I really think that we just really lack respect. I mean, it's nothing for kids to, throw rocks at a stray dog, just mean stuff. There's no reason to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think it's just the evilness in us, and it's unfortunate, but yeah, so that's about, I don't know. So it's heartbreaking when you see that, because if they'll do it to an animal, they'll do it to a person.
Yeah, there's another set. Paul couldn't have possibly have envisioned Western style democracy any more than he could envision a space shuttle and iPhones. So, when he's writing some of these things, we start and kind of laying our understanding and our experiences over. And, Paul couldn't even imagine some of the things that we're turning it into, and we're twisting it and moving. Yeah. So
no, he wouldn't have. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of phrases that I hear that people take out of context, and one of them is synagogue of Satan. And the way that I see this tying in, when you had a synagogue, a leader of a synagogue, say it's a rabbi, say it's a Pharisee, and they were known to be teaching false teaching or things outside of Torah, things that weren't part of their understanding of Torah, then he was called, and everybody who went there, it was called a synagogue of Satan, because there was false teaching going on in that synagogue.
Right.
And a lot of times we try to use that phrase against all Jews. So
yeah, I don't think that would be accurate. Okay, here's the word that we couldn't say the other day.
Did we read Romans 13?
Yeah, let me go ahead and read Romans 13, 1 through 4. I'll go ahead and get the context of that, and then we'll be able to touch on some of it. Okay, so we understand the shame versus honor, and the guilt versus innocent, So we're continuing with some of the commands, because Paul is kind of giving some commands. And it says, so this is Romans 13, 1 through 4. It says, everyone is to obey the governing authorities, for there is no authority that is not from God, and the existing authorities have been placed where they are by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities is resisting what God has instituted. Those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are no terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you like to be unafraid of the person in authority? Then simply do what is good, and you will win his approval, for he is God's servant. Therefore, your benefit. But if you do what is wrong, be afraid, because it's not for nothing that he holds power of the sword, for he is God's servant, and he is there to punish wrongdoers. I think it's important too. He makes a really good point. Paul didn't live in a democracy. Paul didn't have freedoms. I mean, there was slavery, there was very much controls and abuses of powers. There were
armed men walking around all the time.
Very much so. And Paul could not have even imagined Nero or someone like Hitler. I mean, Nero at one point, was fine, and then suddenly as he lost his mind, just began to torment Christians and cancel so many freedoms that they had to the expense of killing them.
Yeah, he did end up killing.
Yeah, and Paul couldn't even imagine, or even Hitler, mass genocide of the Jewish race. I don't think Paul could even have imagined anyone having that kind of power and that ability to destroy that many people. And again, here's the idea: it's the spirit of this. It's not be a pacifist and just let the government run over you and be a yes man and any of that. But it's in all, as much as you're able to live in peace, I think is what how he kind of allowed that.
Yeah. And and it's for our generation, basically this everything, even from the boomers, on up, and we've all had the opportunities to vote and to put in leaders.
They didn't vote. That was a point. Yeah. He made this in the book. They didn't have elections. And even within the Roman Republic, like United States is a republic, we vote to have people speak for us and represent us. In Rome, they were assigned, right? Caesar would assign who, and you could come and speak, but you didn't necessarily represent the slaves or the poor parts of society. You were just one of the, members of the Senate.
Right.
So it was still very different than what we do.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. It says a big difference between Paul's day and ours is that we have considerably more say in the matter, even being able to help those choose those who govern us and create our social laws. So the word here, obey, and this is one of the words that Stephanie and I talked about earlier. We did a little mini commercial for Mark and for the Lamb Network. But the word obey in Greek is hupotasso, and it means more to submit oneself to authority or control. It has the sense of reciprocal obligation. A government's decrees and the citizen would carry it out. It's more along the lines of being a subject. Subject yourself to the law.
It's more like a two-way street, where obey is a one-way street.
Right.
You do what they say.
But this is more being subject.
So, and it's interesting because, I even read today or saw somebody talking about it on a reel, but King James, when he had his, of course, King James version of the Bible written, he changed things because, especially like the way that we understand that whole thing of slapping on the face. I heard someone talk about that today. And the reason that he used more of a language, because he had all these basically peasants. He had thousands and thousands of peasants in his rule. And he didn't want any of them to think that they could stand up against their ruler or that person that, he put in charge. So he kind of changed the word that he used to turn the other cheek. And it wasn't as much turn the other cheek as it was stand your ground. But then turn your back and walk away. It's still the same message. Don't involve yourself in it. But it's more of, you don't have to be, a mat on the floor.
On the floor. Yeah, I found the quote that I was looking for too. It's on page 336. It just, let's summarize. Basically, it says the principle Paul's expressing is that as far as it is possible and as far as it is up to us, we're to have peaceful coexistence with our government authorities, show respect even to those leaders that we don't necessarily agree with, because God requires it of us. And he does reference Jeremiah 27:5-11, how even the prophet Jeremiah had to remind Israel that God of this principle when when they were conquered by Nebuchadnezzar and exiled into Babylon, Jeremiah, he's like, I'm going to give Nebuchadnezzar authority. He's going to he'll have the ability. Right. And it's a good reminder too of, kings and kingdoms are established by God, and rulers, and they are established by God. And I think we can, pray for our leaders and pray for our nation and pray for the world. And I think God will hear those prayers. But ultimately, people are put in place to serve His will. And, like them or love them or hate them, they're going to be used by God to accomplish His will. And sometimes we don't like that. Sometimes we wish for other things, but it's been planned already.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
He calls him His servant. And so, Nebuchadnezzar was actually called God's servant. So he had a purpose and a plan for Nebuchadnezzar to do carry out what he wanted.
Saul, think of it. Saul was not a great leader for Israel. He was their first king, and he may have started okay, but the plan was never to have a king for Israel. And he kind of lost his mind there and ended up having his head hanging on a wall. But and other kings, we had even Solomon. Solomon is considered a great king of Israel. But even he had his challenges, all 900 of them.
Yeah.
And, God still is able to use it. He's the king that was used to build the temple. So, David was considered a great king and got man after God's own heart, but yet even he wasn't allowed to build the temple. So, Moses was a great leader, but he didn't get to enter the promised land, so God is still using who He puts in place.
Imperfect people.
For His, imperfect people. Thankfully He uses imperfect people.
Yeah. It says at the top of 337, Jeremiah tells us that God operates behind the scenes to set up nations and bring rulers into power. And so we are we are to subject ourselves to them. But this is not something that's said so easily with Western Christians.
That's exactly right.
So the vast majority of us living in democracies.
Oh, he then goes into, Paul couldn't even consider Nero or Hitler. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to turn the page and let's see. Romans 13, 5 through 8. Was there anything else on 37 before we turn into it? You okay?
It brings up the stories in Acts about Stephen and and everybody who was jailed, like Saul and Paul, I should say, Paul and Silas and Peter. There were all different people who were jailed, and God supernaturally let them loose or whatever. And then even Stephen, who had false witnesses against him, ended up dying for false witnesses. So bad things happen.
And Paul was I think most of us know the story, but Paul was in the crowd while Stephen was being stoned, and then Paul ends up being used to further the message, the gospel. So there's a lot. God can definitely use who He needs to use. All right. Romans 13, 5 through 8. Another reason to obey besides fear of punishment is for the sake of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's public officials, constantly attending to these duties. Pay everyone what he is owed. And if you owe the tax collector, pay your taxes. And if you owe the revenue collector, pay your revenue. And if you owe someone respect, pay him respect. And if you owe someone honor, pay him honor. Don't owe anyone anything except to love one another, for whoever loves his fellow human being has fulfilled Torah. So, and that again is this whole section, kind of the overriding theme is love your neighbors as yourself, love your neighbor, which, by the way, was not a New Testament thought. It's a quote of Torah. It's quoting Torah.
And he also brings in Matthew 22, 16 through 21, where, Yeshua says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. So he's actually repeating what Yeshua said to his
Right.
disciples.
Right.
So
Okay. Here's the line. Here's the bottom line. Believers, Christians, Messianics, we are to have no debt unpaid, whether that debt is to God or an individual, business, or a government. That debt can be a debt of gratitude, a debt of respect, a debt of forgiveness, or a debt of money. But the one debt that we should never stop repaying is the debt of love to our fellow man. So,
years ago, we were wanting to make an investment in something for our house and didn't really have the money. And a friend said, "Here, I'll give you the money for it." And Mike was like, "Well, I'll definitely pay you back." He goes, "No, I don't really, I don't need it. I'm good." And I felt like the Lord wanted me to give it to you so you could purchase that. And but a couple years later, they were in a hard time.
oh,
And the Lord told me, give that money back to him now. The money
good.
he gave you, give it to
Yeah.
him. And I went to my husband and I said, I feel like we're supposed to give that money back now. This is the time. They're needing money. So we did. We just put it in a card and gave it to him. And he thanked us and he said, that was exactly what we needed. Thank you.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So, so you never know. I mean, don't forget the people who have helped you with one thing or another to turn around and help them, be reciprocal that way.
That's good. I like to, that's kind of always been our philosophy. Like if we don't do loans, like if a friend, if a friend needs money or something, I'm just going to give it to them. I'm not going to loan it to them because I don't want them to have a debt over it.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to mess up a friendship, so that's just kind of been our philosophy with our family.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Anything else on 339?
I don't think I had anything else there highlighted.
Okay. I'm going to say this because he's bringing up more of Matthew, talking about Torah, paying taxes. And it says, and he kind of reiterates this. We've said this lots of times. What Christ taught and what Paul taught about loving our neighbor was a bedrock principle of the Old Testament and of Judaism. It's not an innovative new Christian doctrine that in time came to be known as the Golden Rule. We call it the Golden Rule. We've pulled it into our Christian understanding of things, but this was a bedrock, and everything that Torah establishes, looking after widows, even rights for women. I mean, there's to care for women, that those are they go against the grain of society in which they dwelled, and a lot of them have been pulled into New Testament. But they're not new. It's nothing new. It's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
The root of every commandment of God, old or new, is entirely based on love your neighbor and love God. And so that is very much out of Torah. Torah. Okay.
Yeah, this was good. There's a part here. To think that standing against homosexuality as God stands firmly against it in his word is violating the principle of love your neighbor is fundamentally wrong-minded. And the reason that a large block of the church has adopted the view that it is wrong to practice a life for life, or it is wrong to condemn homosexuality as sin, or to prohibit gay marriage, is because these Christians don't understand or believe that the root of every commandment of God, Old and New Testament, is entirely based on love your neighbor and love God. So,
yeah,
it doesn't give us permission to treat them badly, call them names. I mean, I see that so much with the poor community. And we've got some really, really good teachers I follow on Facebook. And whenever they start talking about, and I'm not putting them down at all,
Mhm.
because there are some who just dig it in, dig, and there are others who are really just trying to help you understand,
Mhm.
you know, what the Bible actually says. And but they are met with bullies. They are met with mean and
Mhm.
hateful comments. And and I mean, this one was just very inappropriate. This Christian who was, defending his own faith, but
Mhm.
he called him a name that wasn't appropriate. And then the
Mhm.
guy, who was talking, just kind of turned around and said, "Is that the language you use as a Christian? Is that the
Yeah.
language you think is appropriate?"
Yeah.
And but we have to do better. Just
Mhm.
because we don't agree with somebody doesn't mean we knock them off some pedestal you think they're on. So
That's right. That's right. I agree. I agree. Okay. Okay, we're gonna jump into Romans 9 through 10. I told you
Mhm.
we're gonna get through this chapter fast. We're doing good. All right. It says, for the commandments, do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and any others are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbors as yourself. Love does not do harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fullness of Torah. And I want to read that. The word that I have in love is the fulfillment of, it says, love does no wrong to a neighbor. That love, therefore, is the fulfillment of the law. And so he is using the word Torah there, not just the
Mhm.
law, generic term. So Paul is actually repeating many of the Ten Commandments. I think he doesn't quote. There's a couple of them that he doesn't quote, but he's basically quoting 4 of the 10.
Okay.
So, and so
Yeah.
just again, this is not new. It's nothing. You're able to go back into the Old Testament and read these exact commands.
Mhm.
Um, so the question though that we bring up a lot is, and even Paul and Jesus was asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Who would be my neighbor? And so the neighbor is it's not your family.
Mhm.
Your family is your family. They would get an even greater consideration and love since they are
Yeah.
close blood relatives.
Yeah.
Um, but for many believe there's always that nagging question of who is my neighbor. And so then he suggests that we go to Leviticus 19. A
Mhm.
neighbor is a fellow Israelite and another Hebrew. So this is something I've kind of picked up in this commentary. Your family, your family is one, and so that would be your priority.
Right.
And then just outside of that would be your believing community, or we would say our church members or our
Mhm.
body of believers. So when we are to help and assist and love our neighbor, that's the number one.
Right.
And then beyond that would be, any outside of the community. But
Mhm.
if you think a lot about it, a lot of churches have put in this, I this is going to sound terrible, but in the zeal to spread the gospel, they're more concerned with out missions in another country, or
Yeah,
missions
I know.
in another state, or missions away, but you have members of your assembly that are struggling, or members
Mhm.
within your community that
Exactly.
definitely could benefit that, and that should be the priority. That should be the
Mhm.
first, and then if you're able to give beyond that, by all means give beyond that, but your body should be the first. Your body
Yeah.
of believers should be the
Yeah,
first.
and I explained that very thing to my son, because he
Mhm.
he has a really good job, and
Yeah.
he wants to put money aside for God.
Mhm.
And but he's like, my church does not need my tithe. He goes,
Yeah.
it is big. They have everything they want.
Mhm.
They buy what they don't even need. This kind
Mhm.
of stuff.
Mhm.
And I said, then save it. And when you see someone in need, you help them.
Yeah. Oh, what a great thing.
If you
Mhm.
find somebody in your groups that you're part of that, hey, they're struggling, then you
Mhm.
help them. If
Mhm.
somebody tells you, hey, my, whatever, um, you just help. And that's what the Bible says. I said, God told us to take care of orphans and widows.
Mhm.
And on top of that, he said, take care of strangers, take care
Mhm.
of people around you, take care of
Mhm.
your neighbor.
Mhm.
So,
I'm going to add one more layer too, because in the book, when that command was given in Torah, it was your family and then your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So your tribe would have been your body of believers, your
community. It went out like clan, and all of that. Clan was a smaller component of a tribe. Right. There were many clans within a tribe. So yeah, you kind of worked your way out.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think we can definitely learn from that and definitely understand, this is all based out of Leviticus 19. It's 19:15 through 18. And do not be unjust and unjudging. Show neither partiality to the poor or difference to the mighty, but with justice judge your neighbors. And do not go around spreading slander. Do not hate your brother in your heart, but rebuke your neighbor frankly. And so there's the use of the word neighbor. So it's going to be in that timing, in that setting, it's going to be your immediate family and then your tribe and who is with you. So yeah, I think there's definitely a different understanding between then and now of who our neighbor is. For sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was good, that last part there.
Yeah. All right. Do you want me to turn the page or is there anything else?
Yeah, 342. I mean, I have Luke 10:25 through 37.
Okay.
We don't have to read it all, obviously, but I thought it was good just because it expands on the definition of neighbor, both beyond physical flesh or national Israel. And I thought that was interesting. So this part comes from the Old Testament. You are to love Adonai, your God, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your understanding, and your neighbor as yourself. This, when he is quoting this in Luke, he's quoting Old Testament.
That's right.
And and I just don't. It's probably Leviticus or something like that, like you just read. So I think it's just important. A Torah teacher, by definition, a Pharisee, immediately answered Yeshua's question about eternal life by quoting the dual underlying principles of Torah of loving your neighbor and loving God. Yeshua commended him on being correct. Remember that a Torah teacher or a Pharisee was a representative of Judaism and the synagogue system, not of the temple. So even this Pharisee, who was a scholar of tradition, meaning the halakha, more than actual biblical Torah, held these two principles as the basis for his own scriptural understanding.
That's right. That's right. Which is something Paul has been talking about this entire time. Like, are you going to follow Torah, what the word says, or are you putting halakha, which is oral translation, above it? And that's the same thing when Yeshua was rebuking the Pharisees, he was doing the same thing. He return to Torah, return to the word, not just your man's traditions, not men's traditions. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? We are up to Romans 13:11 through 12. We're actually going to finish a chapter in 1 week. Besides all of this, at what point of history we stand. So it's high time for you to rouse yourself from sleep, for the final deliverance is near than when we first came to trust. The night is almost over and the day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and arm ourselves with weapons of light. And I like this little section because he makes the point that this is actually an end time prophecy, if you will, that it's end time language that Paul is using. It says that, at what point we're at. It's high time to rouse yourself from sleep. Paul also could not imagine that Yeshua would not return for 2,000 years. He
actually I think that he believed that it would happen in his lifetime.
Within his lifetime, yeah.
Yeah, but man, does that put other scriptures that he wrote in perspective? I think.
How?
Because even in Thessalonians, when we see, the whole thing with he will come with the sound of a trumpet on the clouds. And one of the things I learned from a very good teacher was basically when they came on clouds, it was the dust that the horses, stirred up,
Yeah. Oh,
and it
that's
looked
interesting.
like clouds. So when they would see him in the distance, a
Yeah.
mighty king or a
Yes.
mighty soldier coming, they would actually say, "He's coming in the clouds. He's on his
Okay,
way."
that changes things. So, yes. I mean, and of course, like we know that. Of course it does. You see it on TV and movies and everything.
Yep.
But that makes so much sense because too, if he's coming as a victorious warrior, and we know that he's, when Christ returns, Yeshua returns, he's got a few stops to make before he gets into Jerusalem, and he's going to be entering like a victorious king. That totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's exciting.
So yeah, so when you start looking at other verses, and even like I said in Thessalonians, and he's like, "Oh, don't be scared. Some of you have been given letters that Yeshua already returned, and you've missed out." And he's like, "No, he hasn't returned yet." So even others thought about it, and that's why they all thought it was going to happen soon.
That's good.
And it's funny because our grandparents thought it was going to happen soon. My parents
Everybody, I think every generation. I think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I do.
But we could all be wrong.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah. I think we're going to be wrong. I like the little point that he made too. He's talking about wake up. The night is almost over. Mm-hmm. The day is almost here, and he makes it. Those are analogies, and those are it's figurative language. And he says, the night. Darkness is always a biblical metaphor for evil, and light is almost always a biblical metaphor for good. And then we can better understand that the words that follow about putting off behavior that occurs in the darkness and putting on behavior that occurs in daylight. And right. I think most of us understand that. I think that's something we know that darkness hides sin and things. So I think that's something.
Sorry.
Go for it.
It's just funny because every time I get up in the morning, and a lot of times in Northeast Ohio, it's just cloudy. Okay. There's just like no sun coming in. And, but okay. I thought we lost something. But it's funny because when the sun is bright and our one door faces the east, and it's a sliding glass door. So when the sun is really bright in the morning and it comes in, I just look at my kitchen and I'm like, look what the sun exposed.
I can see all the dust.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I didn't dust that very well, did I? Or I didn't wipe that very well. Yeah. Because it exposes the dirt. It exposes all of that, where the dust is, where anything is not rubbed clean or whatever. And it's the same with our life. I mean, I think about that every single time. It's like, the light of God is going to expose all of our faults and all of the places that
all of earth will be full of a bunch of little roaches running from the light. That's sad.
It's the same with us. We will run from that light if we have not, taken care of our own hearts. And this was another thing. There was a guy who was talking about the actual Hebrew word for prayer. Yeah. And he goes, this is not a word that means that you just lay out, you just like talk to God about everything you want or whatever. He goes, it's about actually cleansing yourself before God, like having a conversation that, Lord, this is where I just mess up. This is what I just can't seem to get a hold of in my life or whatever. This is what I'm struggling with. So it's actually kind of, not just repenting, but it's actually like judging yourself before him. Like, this is where I fail.
I think that's good, because there is no repentance if we don't acknowledge. And, if we don't do that, then we think we're perfect. If we don't take the time to ask to confess our sins, then like, oh, I'm fine today, we're good. You haven't done anything too terrible today, right? And that becomes a problem. That definitely becomes a problem. All right. I want to, let's see, Romans 13:14. Hey, we made it to the end. Look at us. All right. Let us live properly as people do in the daytime. This is just a continuation of the thought. Not partying, not getting drunk, not engaged in sexual immorality and other excesses, not quarreling, not being jealous. Instead, clothe yourself with Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, and don't waste your time thinking about how to provide for the sinful desire of your old nature. So he does go on to list a few of the behaviors that do occur in the darkness and that they need to stop, especially among believers. And he said, no doubt this would have been a particular problem for the city of Rome, where recipients, they partying and drinking and sexual immorality was part of not only the lifestyle, but oftentimes it was part of temple worship and worshiping other gods. So definitely would have been something that needed to be addressed and fixed if you're going to be a believer, for sure. Okay. Paul's audience, because of such motif, the behavior was common in Judaism and regularly referred to as righteousness. I don't want to. He's talking about clothing yourself. I missed a section because he says put on clothing, clothe yourself with the Messiah. So that would have been a motif that was very common in Judaism, regularly referred to as righteousness, putting on righteousness.
Yes.
But also it's covenant language, because when you cut a covenant, part of making a covenant is exchanging robes or exchanging I don't want to say identity,
armor.
but it's like I'm putting on that person's identity, because now I have the benefit of everything that they have to offer as part of this covenant that I've made. So by putting on Christ, or putting on the likeness of Christ, that's covenant language. And so I'm putting on that. So it's gives us the free gift on account of our trust in Christ's sacrifice and his perfect faithfulness, to get on with the business of living a redeemed life in victory, as opposed to our former life as a slave to sin. So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We did one chapter.
We did.
It's pretty good. We are going to continue. So Romans only has 16 chapters. So we'll do 14, we'll do 15. And 16, we may just breeze through pretty quick because it's a lot of thank yous and don't forgets and greetings. So not a ton of there, but he may have. I'm curious to see like if he has indications of who some of these people are, and I'm always curious about that. Also, I think we're going to have to pre-tape next week. I know both of us have something going on next weekend. I'm going on a cruise, so. Next Sabbath, I will be rocking on a boat. Hopefully the weather will be okay.
I know. I hope it is.
Yeah.
Do you want to play any of that video for Passover? Because it's Passover for most people.
Can, and I don't know if you want to jump into 14. I know it's about 5 minutes long. Okay.
Whatever
if you want to. Yeah. So one of the people that we follow, both of us are following, you want to give her an introduction? And I know she's on your podcast as well, right?
Yeah. So on April 1st. Okay. So just next week, Wednesday on Passover, she'll be on. And she goes by Hebrew Ha-Has. So she actually tries to put up funny things. That's just her Facebook page. She doesn't necessarily, I saw that. She doesn't necessarily kind of reveal who she is and stuff. She just kind of likes to keep under the radar and stuff for different reasons. But she is an artist. She's very talented with lyrics and music, and even putting scenes together. So she made this video. It's almost 7 minutes, but we can stop if we have to. But it's just a beautiful video, and it's from the point of view of a soldier walking through Egypt on the night that the angel of death passes through.
Right. So I don't want to mess up any copyright issues. This is not Lambs. This is
right.
If you go to any of her social media, she goes by Hebrew Haha. She creates different videos and songs and things like this almost weekly, I would say. So each week she has something new. So we want to make sure she gets all credit for this.
Yeah. And she's so she's great this way. So
She's very creative. I don't know that I can't do this.
No, I couldn't either, actually.
I can barely get a nice image. Oh, and everything is AI created. She does this
Except
with
for the lyrics. She
Yeah.
did the lyrics and she chose all the pictures of the graphics.
That's awesome.
So she did a great job. So
Yes, she did.
Okay, so this just takes a couple of steps
Mm-hmm.
for me to get it going.
There you go. Make sure the sound is on.
There we go. It's very Egyptian sounding.
Yeah, very Middle Eastern.
Torchlight trembling in my hand, orders echo through the land. Walk the streets, keep watch tonight, but something isn't sitting right. There's a stillness in the air, like a warning, like a prayer. Every doorway that I see, painted red, what could it be? I was told legislate superstition, foreign ways, but my chest is tightening slow. Something here I do not know. Why are their homes so quiet tonight? No cries, no fear, no signs of fright. While tension grows through Egypt's bones, they stand untouched behind closed doors. Blood on the frame and I pass by. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I feel it move, I feel it near, and it's not them that it comes for here. Children sleeping, candles low, peace I've never come to know. No one begging, no one pleads, no one bound in panic's need. Every step I hesitate, at every marked and crimson gate. I should knock, I should demand, but I cannot lift my head. What if this is not their game? What if power bears his name? What if all we mocked before stands alive behind that door? Why are their homes so quiet tonight? No cries, no fear, no signs of fright. While shadows crawl through Egypt's bones, they stand untouched behind closed doors. Blood on the frame and I pass by. My breath is short, my throat is dry. Something's moving I can't command, and it won't be stopped by Pharaoh's hand. It started low, then split the sky. 1,000 voices rising high from every house, from every street. Grief came crashing to my feet. Mothers wailing, fathers fall, echoes tearing through the halls. I start to run, I don't know where, but death is everywhere. Not the slaves, not in that place, not a tear on Goshen's face, but here the breath is ripped away, and no one lives to beg or pray. Now all of Egypt cries tonight. No strength, no throne, no will to fight. The silence there, the storm is here, and every heart is split by fear. Blood on the frame, I see it now. A line drawn firm, we won't cross how. We mock the sign, we mock their cry. Now firstborn son, just die. I reach the gates, the guards undone. No orders now, no rising sun. Inside the walls, the great undone. Even Pharaoh's lost his son. And I stood and watched it pass by doors marked red. It did not ask, it knew the line, it knew the cause. And everything we had is lost. Torch burned out in trembling hands. I do not know this shattered land, but I know this night was not by chance. We were warned, we watched, we never had a chance.
Okay, that's pretty much it.
That's it. Yeah. So it's Hebrew ha-has. And no, she doesn't share her name. She just uses that as her platform. So
Nettie didn't like it, but I think
Nettie
bad.
didn't like that. Thanks for joining us. And you guys have a great, blessed evening. Get some rest, Stephanie. I hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us. And we will see you on recording next week. If you missed today's show and want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.